And I am finally live on my other platforms. Good morning. I mean, oh Lord, it is crazy here. I'm just praying everybody stays safe. I know a friend of mine said a tree fell in her yard last night. That's how crazy it is. And they're saying, yeah, thunderstorms are crazy. And they're saying there's more thunderstorms coming through today. So, and for all of you, you know what? Yep, as long as it doesn't snow, I'm good too. Because this all could be snow. And you know what? For those of you listening, this is a government contract. The cleanup, the going out with the electrical crews, is all a government contract. Oh my goodness. They actually, when they get overwhelmed, they hire companies, they contract with companies to help with the cleanup. I'm laughing about it. Good morning, everybody. I'm not laughing about the destruction, but it is an opportunity. And for the companies who are pre screened and that are on the list, they just call them up and there's a government contracting. They make a mess and then pay you to clean it up. And there it is. Whoop, there it is, as the song says. Tag team. They tag somebody in to help them clean it up. So we were talking about, I said I was going to talk about the presidential budget today. And I was reading the 188 pages last night. We're not going to cover 188 pages in one day. That is a 2-day masterclass, 3-day masterclass. If you cover it the way I cover it, that's a week. So we're going to cover it in bits and chunks. Now, we talked about his tax bill, which would take us from a voluntary tax system to a mandatory tax system. If anybody, for those of you who don't know, the president has proposed we go from a voluntary tax system, which is what we currently have, to a mandatory tax system, which means you have to file. And it would make it a felony if you owe more than $250,000 and haven't paid. For everybody who doesn't know, that's what he has proposed. I know it was in the Ways and Means Committee when I first heard about it. I'm not sure if it's on the floor for debate yet. I have not looked, and I need to look at that to see where it's gone. But I know it was in the tax committee, it was in Ways Committee, it was in committee. That's his proposal. Should it pass? And because I've seen where the IRS intends to ramp up and they are making certain changes for their system so that FY25 kicks in, the first thing they're going to do is look for any taxpayer who has not filed taxes. I actually believe it's going to pass. Actually, if you have a security clearance, you have to file your taxes. So there is actually something of a myth government employees don't pay taxes. If you have a security clearance, you have to file. It's a part of your regular check. If you hold certain government jobs, they check yearly it's only the low level government employees who may get away with not paying. Congress people tend to slide through. And even then, they don't get away with it that often because of elections. And the ones who get away with it is because they trust their staffers to file the paperwork. And what happens a lot of times, and the only reason I know this is because I'm nosy and I look, it's like the rich people that you hear that owe all these millions of dollars. They go, they pay somebody, And they trust that that person is actually taking the other steps of filing and paying. I don't know if anybody's ever heard. I'm gonna go with Steve Harvey because everybody doesn't know Montel Jordan story. Steve Harvey owed has. How many people know that Steve Harvey's gone broke twice? They don't get passed on the blame because they have to still pay the penalties and interest. They hold the blame because they should have made sure it was filed. People, let me tell the story. You know, how many people know that Steve Harvey's gone broke twice? I went to a conference where he shared his story. What he did was he had a tax person. He went in, they filed the taxes, tax form. He signed the tax form, signed the check. The man took the check, attached it to the tax form, and he assumed that the person sent it off. It was when this tax person died. He received a letter from the IRS. He owed money. He goes, and guess what? Guy never actually sent the stuff in. They had boxes and boxes of his past taxes sitting in a closet. What the man was doing was taking Steve's checks, putting it in his client account, because when you have a tax firm, what you do is deposit it into a client account and then pay one lump sum to the government, because that's how you file when you have tax firms. That guy was skimming. Most people trust that their tax professionals are paying and they never do the follow up. When you are a big executive, when you are Congress people, when you run multi corporations, you don't have the bandwidth to do that. We we're smaller people, so we check because we're doing it ourselves. When you're running multi-billion-dollar corporations, when you're running to a congressional hearing, when you're doing all this stuff, you don't check. You're trusting that the person you're hiring is doing their job. Not absolving responsibility, but explaining how stuff falls through the cracks. So it's not really as big of a got you as people think it is, that so and so didn't file their taxes. And when you actually listen and hear how it happened, it really isn't that big of a gotcha. It's not that big of a gotcha. Now, are there crooks in Congress? Yeah. Just listen to some of the Senate hearings. Is everybody in Congress a crook? No. And quite frankly, some of the people sitting in Congress, they aren't crooks, they're idiots. But then that says something about the people who voted them in. Moving on. That was an opinion. Sorry. What you'll also see on my platform, when I make an opinion, I clearly state this opinion. There's just idiots that get voted in. And for people who keep wanting to talk about term limits, the problem with term limits is there aren't that many people who want to run. Yes, I just threw a whole lot of shade. It's shady over here. People don't want to run. So if you impose term limits and you don't have enough people to run, you're going to stonewall our government. Back to the subject. And we are in an election year. And we need to keep in mind that our local government is just important as our federal government for the point of our budgets. Local budgets are handled and are just as important to our businesses as our federal budgets, because the money rolls down from the top to our local. And if our local people aren't administering our budgets correctly, well, praise God. It affects your business. Your local zonings are important. As I said last week, they could pass a rule saying that you can't work from home. The reason I can do this broadcast from my home office instead of my office is because there's no law saying that I can't. It was actually a law that says you can work from home. People fail to understand the importance of legislation. It was a law that enabled us to be able to, thank you, Patty. It was a law that enabled companies to allow remote work. People don't understand and fully appreciate the effect legislation have on operations. And if it wasn't for the fact that businesses petitioned for those laws, so if you as a business owner appreciate those laws and how it makes things convenient, we have to keep an eye on the legislation going through Congress, Senate, and our local jurisdictions and how they affect our laws. So back to the president. If this tax bill passes, anybody who has an outstanding tax bill, I suggest you contact a reputable tax professional and get that taken care of because government math is worse than Common Core. And once you get, and here's about the penalties and interest. Penalties and interest in government goes back to the date of occurrence. So hitting that $250,000 is not going to be hard. Thank you, Petty. Thank you for the gifts. It just not isn't going to be that hard. So I just want you to go to a reputable tax professional. And if you're concerned about your tax burden and your tax liability, talk to a tax planner. Now, tax preparer and a tax planner are not necessarily the same thing and not necessarily the same person, especially as your businesses grow. I want you to understand that. I know we like to do this one and done shopping, but that does not apply in business. Tax preparer and a tax planner are not necessarily the same person. A tax preparer is somebody who focuses on the accounting of taxes. This goes in one place, this goes in another place. These are the deductions that you can take or the allowances that you can take in your businesses per the IRS. A tax planner comes into your business and say, per the IRS, these are the allowances that you can take, and these are the steps you can plan for throughout the year to reduce the risk of you owing per quarter. And they lay out a strategy for you to either reduce the risk of owing or plan accordingly in conjunction with your other consultant to pay or plan to pay any taxes you may owe. That's the difference. And the tax preparer, all they do is crunch numbers and produce a document that goes to the IRS. The tax planner says this is the potential and this is what we can do to reduce and mitigate. Everybody can't do the reduce and mitigate part. And I'm going to go here. Just because they have CPA behind their name does not mean that they are reputable and they know what they're doing. I know people who are enrolled agents. If they are an enrolled agent, they're better than a CPA in most cases because an enrolled agent can actually go before the IRS and defend you. Just a CPA, it's not necessary. So if they are CPA and an enrolled agent, you've got something. Most CPAs cannot go before the IRS and defend that tax return. So, and that's a long conversation. Matter of fact, that's a podcast episode. So thank you. So I would definitely, if you're in business, you're looking to start a business, if you're a government contractor, you can't not file your taxes, because that is something that they check on a yearly basis when they start to audit you. Especially CAS coverage, and CAS is the cost accounting standards. Once you get CAS covered, you're on the auditor's radar. They check on a yearly basis that non-compliance. They will stop your billing if you do not cure that non-compliance. They will actually pull your contracts and then give it to somebody else. And here's the thing: if you will not do a simple thing as file your taxes as a proper citizen of this country, this is the logic, then how are they trusting that you're meeting the terms and conditions of that contract? Walk the logic. It makes sense. I know we still haven't gotten into the meat of the live yet, but this is a good topic. Compliance says, and this is my ghetto definition, you're doing or you're adhering to the rules and regulations of your industry. And then I'm going to go here in government contracting, they actually test that you're adhering to the rules and regulation by going into your systems and following the system. So, and I've lost my other stream. That's okay, because I've got the stream on TikTok. It's amazing. It's character and integrity all the way around. So going back to the original topic, we took a while on that taxes. We took a while on that taxes, but that's okay. Back to the subject, which is the presidential budget. Now, the president submits a budget to Congress, and then it gets parsed between the various committees for the committees to rip it apart, basically. And then it goes to the House, and then it goes to the Senate. If they approve it, it gets enacted. If they don't approve it, it gets bounced back, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, the breakdown of the budget, and I'm doing the breakdown of the different departments because I want you to see where the opportunities lie on the top level. Department of Agriculture. There are several opportunities within the Department of Agriculture outside of farming. Department of Commerce. Department of Defense. Now, Department of Commerce, people sleep on the Department of Commerce. Now, they don't have a huge budget, but they do have a multi-million-dollar budget. Everybody wants to go to the Department of Defense, but to go over to the Department of Defense, you have to have your stuff together. And they don't care if you're certified or not. They do not care. Your stuff needs to be tight to work with DOD. You need to be audit ready when you walk through the door to do anything with DOD. And you need to be able to obtain security clearances the bigger the contracts are, if you're trying to get deeply entrenched in DOD. So if you're a business who never wants to get an office, always want to do remote. I personally would tell you don't do DoD, because to triple encrypt communications and all that stuff, you're not going to expend the money because you don't want to pay for an office. I'm, I'm just putting it flat out there. If you don't want to pay for an office, you don't want to do what it takes to work with DoD. People keep saying, well, in this day and age, you should, in this day and age, we keep having malware, spyware, Euroware, myware molding into records. So to do remote and DoD work, the level of encryption that you need to have is something beyond buying something off the shelf. And you have to adopt the CMMI to work with DoD. Now, you also have to have standardized rates. Now, if I'm talking way over your head, you need to book a call with me. You have to have standard rates to work with DoD. Every contract do not have their own set of rates. Stop that. Whoever's telling you that is a lie from the pits of hell. Oh my God, I don't want to get on a tangent. Every contract does not have its own set of rates, except for SEA and SCA have their own rates, and there's some exceptions. However, you have big rates that you have to develop, and those rates have to be subject to audits. But yeah, you have to have all of that in place prior to bidding. So yeah, so if you're going after DoD, um, Department of Education, for all of our educators out here who are just grieved to your heart about the state of education, I say come together, go after some of these Department of Education money. And it starts at the federal level and trickles its way to the state level. So there are various ways that you can tackle this problem. Department of Energy. Now, Department of Energy actually has its own classification. They have their own security classification, and they special. So, so everybody's familiar with the standards. They actually have their own with their own rigorous thing. They special, but they actually have a lot of things, a lot of reports that they run in the Department of Energy. So if you're a scholar and you'd like to do a lot of research, Department of Energy is somewhere that you can do. They actually do. If you're a person who don't want to do a big company, but you're interested in government contracting, Department of Energy may be an option. I'm just throwing out some things. Health and Human Services. You will find a lot of your Health and Human Services is the catch-all umbrella. Health and Human Services, in conjunction with Homeland Security, it deals with a lot of your immigration stuff. Those two deal with immigration in conjunction. So you will find a lot of contracts that overlap with those two departments. HUD, everybody's familiar with HUD. They deal with housing. Department of Interior, Department of State. If you want to do the Department of State is where you should focus. I can't even read my own writing. That's terrible. The Department of Treasury issues various RFPs. EPA They do a lot of ecological studies. So if you're an ecologist, if you have a heart for the environment, the EPA is where you want to look at. The National Aeronautics, the National Science Institute, everybody knows about the SBA. SBA actually do issue RFPs. So if you want to work with small businesses through the SBA, if they issue RFPs. Social Security Administration actually issues RFPs. Um, what a lot of people don't know is the call centers, what you call it, that you call to. That's through the Social Security Administration. That's a contract. And for all of you who are listening through my other streaming, I'm having problems with my internet, so it's going in and out, in and out, in and out. I'm gonna upload this full. I'm gonna re-upload this thing. I'm gonna re-record it and just upload a new recording for you guys. I apologize. The weather is horrible and it is affecting my streaming. So anyway, so the presidential budget covers all of these areas, including security, including changing a lot of things, including the tax code, which is what took up over half of our segment this morning. So I'm going to close this segment down with this. There are a lot of changes on the horizon that's going to affect business and the way we do business and the way we conduct business. There are changes coming to the Department of Commerce. Some changes aren't that big, some changes are. Some changes are the CMMI change, I actually see going all throughout government contracting. And once it goes through government contracting, it'll affect everybody. And CMMI, in a nutshell, basically is there's this uptick of ransomware that's attacking corporations. And it's actually what's driving up costs. So they're making businesses secure their systems, basically. I mean, we have to make sure our networks are tight. It's driving up costs because the security that we have to install is it's costly for a small business or a one person shop. And to maintain that cost on a yearly basis can be costly for one person shop. Now, for a multi-billion dollar business, $1,000, $2,000 cost, this is a drop in a bucket. For a smaller company, that can mean a lot to a bottom line. So it can mean a difference between charging $2 for an item and $4 for an item because the cost has to be absorbed somewhere. So when the CMMI requirement came out 2 years ago, I believe it is, when it was introduced, it was this whole, well, it's only in one agency. Anytime DOD leads something, it's eventually going across the government. Just like there was this talk 2 years ago about cross contracting. So if one agency has a contract or a cross contract vehicle, so it's a return to mega contracts or mega contract vehicles. The government had it once before, and then they went away from it because agencies wanted the ability to have flexibility. And there's talk in the government sphere of going back to it. I see a hybrid of that because agencies still want to have flexibility, which is which is this. If Department of Commerce has a training or leadership training contract, then the Department of Interior would be able to tap into that contract. Well, that benefits you if you have that leadership contract, because now you have Department of Commerce and the Department of Interior as a client. Well, now you need to be able to segue or bob and weave. Now, the downfall for the contractor is if you're not able to expand or pivot to take on the increased work, you could potentially lose that contract and they go with a larger contractor because they need a contractor who can expand on a dime and go from servicing 20 to potentially 200. So that's why I'm doing my next podcast episode is understanding the type of contractor you are. So you understand who you're going to work with in the government, in the type of contracts that you're going to bid on, and how you are going to negotiate those contracts, and how you talk to your contract client and potential for that contract in the future. So that's my new podcast episode that'll be up next week. And then my next episode is going to be on proposal compliance. So with that, I'm going to look at this recording to see how much of it cut in and out because of the weather. I may re-record it. I may just do another masterclass on the presidential budget. I used to do one every year. I may or may not. Anywho, so if you have any questions about anything I covered today, my DMs are open. You can drop the questions. Please be respectful because I have been deleting some ridiculous questions. And my block game is fierce. I do believe in blocking people. So with that, I will see you tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, weather permitting. I'm not sure how long this weather pattern is sticking around. And have an amazing day. And be safe out here in these streets while we're enjoying this horrible weather. I'll see you tomorrow morning.